Welcome to XRP Cypher, where we decode how the global financial system is actually being rebuilt. This podcast isn't about price predictions or speculation. It's about infrastructure, liquidity, and how money moves behind the scenes. Each episode breaks down XRP, the XRP Ledger, Ripple, and the regulatory and financial mechanics shaping the next generation of settlement. If you want clear explanations without hype and a long-term view of where global finance is heading, you're in the right place. This is XRP Cypher.
Glad to be here for this one. We have a lot to cover.
We really do. Welcome, everyone. We have a massive stack of source material sitting in front of us today, and if you are someone who likes to know how the gears of global finance actually turn, you are going to love this deep dive.
Oh, absolutely.
We are looking at everything from heavily technical regulatory frameworks like the New York UCC Article 12, global liquidity mandates, and even a major Ripple press release that just dropped today, March 3, 2026.
Yeah, it is. It's a dense stack of reading.
Yeah.
But when you zoom out and synthesize all these disparate press releases and legal frameworks, a very specific, undeniable architecture really starts to emerge.
Right. And our mission today is to completely bypass the retail noise and decode what we are calling the infrastructure of trust.
I like that phrasing.
We want to show you exactly how the next generation of global financial settlement is being wired together right now. We're talking about acquired regulatory licenses, silent banking vendor integrations, and the mechanics of institutional margin collateral. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
We often hear debates about which blockchain has the fastest transaction speed or, the lowest fees. But if you are a multinational bank, the tech is actually secondary to the compliance.
100%.
Think about it like Formula One racing. You could build the most technologically advanced, blindingly fast car on the planet. But if you don't have a legally sanctioned driver's license and a track to race it on, that car is just an expensive museum piece. In the global financial system, the technology is the car, but the regulatory licenses are the track. You simply cannot operate without them.
Exactly. And looking through these documents, you see a multi-year methodical strategy by Ripple to buy and build that track. They haven't been chasing temporary retail trends. They've been securing enterprise-grade regulatory clearance across the globe's strictest jurisdictions.
Right.
First, you have the Luxembourg EMI, which is the Electronic Money Institution license from the CSSF. Under the MiCA framework, that license allows for passporting across the entire European Union. It grants the legal authority to issue electronic money and crucially holds safeguarded client funds across Europe.
Then you move over to Asia, and they secured the Major Payment Institution, or MPI license, from the Monetary Authority of Singapore.
Yeah, and Singapore isn't just a strict regulator. It is one of the premier foreign exchange hubs on the planet. Operating legally, there's a massive prerequisite for any global liquidity provider.
And then moving to the United States, they hold the NYDFS Trust Company Charter in New York, right?
They do. And operating within that stringent BIT license environment is notoriously difficult for digital asset firms. But even more significant than that is the Conditional Federal Trust Charter.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one.
It's massive. Once fully realized, that federal charter shifts their entire liquidity model. It moves them into a completely different tier of federal compliance that traditional banks are actually comfortable interacting with. What's fascinating here is that none of these licenses are designed for retail crypto apps.
No, not at all.
They are heavy-duty institutional-grade permissions. They allow a company to operate directly across regulated global rails, interacting seamlessly with Tier 1 banks and sovereign payment providers without acting like some rogue outsider.
And we just saw another major pillar of this regulatory track fall into place in the Middle East. Back in November 2025, Abu Dhabi's Financial Services Regulatory Authority, the FSRA, officially recognized RLUSD, Ripple's USD-backed stablecoin.
Right, as an accepted fiat reference token within the Abu Dhabi Global Market, or ADGM.
Exactly.
The ADGM is an international financial center with incredibly robust standards. Having RLUSD recognized there means licensed. Authorized institutions in the region can legally use that specific stablecoin for core financial functions.
Like collateral.
Collateral, cross-border payments, you name it. It establishes the asset as a trusted settlement vehicle in a region that is aggressively expanding its digital asset infrastructure. It effectively opens the door for capital market support via Ripple Prime in the Middle East.
So the regulatory track is laid, the legal right to operate is secured. But a major question you might be asking is, how do they actually get the banks to use the car?
Right, the adoption piece.
Yeah. A pervasive misconception is that for any of this to matter, there needs to be a massive headline-grabbing direct partnership with SWIFT. But here's where it gets really interesting. Think of SWIFT like the underlying operating system of a smartphone.
I love this analogy.
Right. When a bank wants to send a cross-border payment, their IT department doesn't sit there and hand code a custom integration into the SWIFT network. They rely on an app store of specialized core banking software vendors.
Exactly. They buy an app.
They purchase these complex payment hubs and messaging gateways off the shelf, so the strategy here wasn't to replace SWIFT. It was to integrate directly into those critical vendors in the App Store.
The documentation reveals that the banking sector already has the switch installed to use XRP, whether individual banks have activated it yet or not. We can identify 7 independent major SWIFT-connected vendors that have already baked Ripple and XRP into their software as a selectable settlement rail.
And these are not startup pilot programs.
No, these are enterprise-grade systems built natively on the ISO 2022 standard, and they are CBPR Plus certified.
And just for context for you listening, ISO 2022 isn't just a new data format. It is a universal messaging language that completely separates the payment message from the actual money movement.
Yes.
And that CBPR Plus certification, cross-border payments, and reporting plus means these systems are rigorously vetted for enterprise cross-border usage. They speak the exact language banks are currently being mandated to adopt globally.
Let's look at the vendors themselves. Take Finastra. Hundreds of banks globally use their software, and Finastra features a specific Ripple connectivity module sitting right alongside their standard SWIFT Service Bureau.
Or look at Volante Technologies. They offer a Volpe Ripple processor module right next to their Fedwire as a service offering. Volante has actually been on the record confirming their platform has the capability to settle directly through XRP.
Then there is ACI Worldwide, a behemoth that hosts roughly 30% of all U.S. SWIFT traffic.
30%.
Yeah, it's huge. And their documentation explicitly outlines DLT and Ripple support alongside their traditional SWIFT and ACH rails.
You also have EastNet's Payment Safe. They provide a literal screen inside their Tier 1 banking hub that allows operators to just choose between SWIFT or Ripple. Plus, the TAs group, providing a European Target 2 facing gateway with a built-in Ripple driver.
Rounding it out, you have Temenos, one of the largest core banking providers on Earth, utilized by over 700 banks globally, and CGI, which went as far as deploying a Ripple validator node directly inside their own corporate data centers.
When you lay it all out like that, the reality of the plumbing becomes undeniable. SWIFT can continue to carry the heavy data messaging, but the bank can choose to route the actual settlement of value through XRP simply by toggling a setting in the software interface they already boot up every single morning.
The modularity of ISO 2022 makes this entirely seamless.
Which brings us to the operational reality. The plumbing exists, the regulatory licenses exist, but banks are deeply conservative institutions. Why go through the operational friction of switching settlement rails if the legacy correspondent banking system technically still functions? What is the actual capital problem here?
It fundamentally comes down to capital efficiency and a very specific type of regulatory pressure. If you are a bank treasurer right now, your biggest headache is Basel III.
Okay, let's talk about Basel III.
Basel III is a global regulatory framework designed to prevent another 2008-style financial collapse. To do that, it enforces something called the Net Stable Funding Ratio, or NSFR.
Right.
Historically, because international payments take days to settle over SWIFT, banks had to park massive amounts of their own capital in pre-funded foreign accounts, known as nostro accounts, just to ensure they had local currency available to facilitate trades.
And under Basel III, those pre-funded nostro accounts are treated as a severe liability.
Exactly. The framework essentially punishes banks for holding that idle, trapped liquidity. It's classified as dead capital. So transitioning to a real-time settlement model that uses a neutral bridge asset is no longer just a technological flex about speed.
It's a mandatory balance sheet optimization strategy.
Yes. It is a way to legally release billions in dead capital back into the bank's active yield-generating operations.
And the ability to safely interact with these new digital assets requires ironclad legal clarity. This is where the New York UCC Article 12 update completely changes the game.
Oh, absolutely.
Article 12 established a legal framework for controllable electronic records, essentially cementing the concept that, in the eyes of the law, control equals ownership.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you understand why prime brokers and custodians have been so hesitant to touch digital assets until now. Secured lending lives and dies on bankruptcy remoteness and priority.
Right. If a borrower defaults, the lender needs to know with absolute legal certainty that they have priority rights to the collateral.
Exactly. And before Article 12, treating a digital asset as enforceable property was a complete legal gray area. Now, a multi-billion-dollar clearinghouse can look at a stablecoin or a digital asset and confidently say, yes, we have the legal framework to lend against this.
And we are seeing major institutions aggressively capitalize on this legal clarity right now. Let's look at the sources from November 2025. Bitnomial made history by becoming the very first U.S. CFTC-regulated derivatives clearinghouse to accept digital assets, specifically RLUSD and XRP, as native margin collateral.
That is a massive shift.
Right. If you are an institutional trader, you no longer have to incur the friction and cost of converting your digital asset positions back into fiat just to post margin for CFTC-regulated crypto derivatives. You can use the assets natively.
And you see a similar institutional embrace with Securitize. They are integrating RLUSD as a 204/7 smart contract off-ramp for massive tokenized treasury funds, specifically BlackRock's BUIDL and VanEck's VBIL.
Which means institutional holders can instantly, programmatically exchange their tokenized treasury shares for a stable fiat-referenced asset at any time of day or night,
Bypassing traditional banking hours entirely.
And we can't ignore Ripple's expanded partnership with TJM Investments either. TJM is a FINRA registered broker-dealer. They are utilizing Ripple Prime's multi-asset execution and clearing services to offer their hedge fund and family office clients vastly improved capital and collateral efficiency. The traditional finance sector is actively plugging into this architecture,
They're laying the pipes.
which sets the stage perfectly for the huge announcement that hit the wires today, March 3, 2026. Ripple announced a major evolution, calling it a universal payments platform.
Yeah, I read through that release this morning.
They've integrated recent acquisitions like Palisade for institutional custody and Rail for virtual accounts to offer a true end-to-end platform. Businesses can now collect, hold, exchange, and pay out in both fiat and stablecoins from a single consolidated operational account.
We're talking about unified collections, managed custody, and advanced liquidity routing across more than 60 major global markets.
And the adoption is already live. Amina Bank just became the first European bank to adopt Ripple payments for near real-time cross-border flows. Corporate giants like Corpay are using it to fund positions across the Asia-Pacific region, with RLUSD, and Banco Genial in Brazil is leveraging it for instantaneous cross-border payouts.
It's moving from theory to daily volume.
But looking at all this massive volume being driven by the RLUSD stablecoin, it begs the question, does a highly efficient stablecoin make a bridge asset like XRP obsolete?
It is a logical question to ask, but the mechanics of global liquidity actually dictate the exact opposite. They perform two entirely different but complementary jobs on the same network rail.
Okay, break that down for us.
RLUSD provides crucial intrazone price stability. It acts as a reliable settlement unit for institutions that require zero foreign exchange volatility on their balance sheets when operating within the US dollar ecosystem.
Right, but stablecoins inherently only move value within a specific currency zone.
Exactly. The moment you need to move value from US dollars to the Philippine peso or from euros to the Mexican peso, you face a bottleneck. You either have to revert to the old Basel III penalized method of pre-funding Nostro accounts in those local currencies, or you use a mathematically neutral bridge.
And that's XRP.
Yes, XRP acts as that interzone bridge asset. It eliminates the need to pre-fund accounts globally by settling the exchange in real time.
Right.
Therefore, as RLUSD drives higher overall payment volume and corporate usage on the ledger, it inevitably creates more global corridors that require instant foreign exchange conversion.
That friction directly drives higher utility demand for XRP to bridge those disparate fiat zones.
They're two halves of the same institutional machine. You need both for it to work.
So what does this all mean when we look at real-world macroeconomic application outside the confines of the U.S. market?
To really grasp the scale of this, we need to look at Japan. SBI Holdings is currently executing a massive real-world deployment. They are utilizing a blockchain platform called iBet for Fin to issue JPY-denominated on-chain security token bonds directly to individual investors.
And the architecture of this bond is brilliant.
It really is. It pays a standard fixed interest rate between 1.85 and 2.45%. However, it also programmatically distributes XRP to the bondholders over time. Now, it is vital to understand that this XRP is not a speculative retail reward. In the context of a bank's balance sheet, it functions as an off-balance sheet liquidity voucher.
Right, because Japan faces a severe structural economic challenge. They have persistent, massive excess yen liquidity trapped domestically, suffering from historically low domestic yields.
And the traditional yen carry trade involves investors borrowing cheap domestic yen, converting it to U.S. dollars to chase higher yields abroad, and simply hoping that foreign exchange volatility doesn't wipe out their margins.
But what SBI is pioneering here is a synthetic on-chain yen carry trade.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Domestic Japanese savings are used to buy the JPY bond. The bond generates and pays out XRP. That newly acquired XRP can then be mobilized globally by those institutions to settle international obligations without ever needing to convert it to U.S. dollars first.
Wow.
It completely bypasses SWIFT friction, and it eliminates legacy correspondent banking risk. It is a highly strategic, regulator-approved method of quietly building deep, persistent global liquidity corridors by moving XRP onto institutional balance sheets as a pure settlement adjunct.
It is a masterclass in building alternative financial plumbing in plain sight. And this real-world utility isn't just isolated to Japan either. It is scaling rapidly across emerging markets.
Oh, absolutely. Africa is a prime example.
Yeah, the documentation highlights that Ripple's on-demand liquidity is deeply integrated with MFS Africa. And just to put that in perspective for you, MFS Africa represents roughly 60% of all mobile money wallets on the entire African continent.
And they have successfully navigated the regulatory sandboxes with the South African Reserve Bank. This isn't a theoretical white paper exercise or an isolated pilot program. This is live, fully regulated infrastructure connecting directly to hundreds of millions of consumer endpoints.
So to synthesize all of this for you, the narrative that emerges from this mountain of sources is incredibly clear. The global financial system is not being rebuilt on the back of retail speculation or social media hype. It is being rebuilt on an infrastructure of trust.
Well said.
We are watching a systematic rollout. The regulatory track has been laid through the Luxembourg EMI, the Singapore MPI, and the NYDFS charter. Legal predictability has been established through frameworks like New York UCC Article 12.
And global mandates like Basel III are actively forcing banks to abandon the old Nostro account capital traps.
Exactly. And rather than fighting the legacy messaging system head-on, the alternative settlement rails have been quietly installed directly into the app store of enterprise banking vendors like Finastra and Volante. The switch is already there.
This raises an important question, and it is a thought I want to leave you with as you watch these markets evolve.
Let's hear it.
If global regulators are actively penalizing banks for holding dead capital, and the major enterprise software vendors have already integrated the toggle to use XRP for instant, pre-fundless settlement, what happens to global liquidity the exact moment a major macroeconomic shock forces the legacy correspondent banking system to freeze?
Right.
If foreign exchange market seize up and traditional U.S. dollar funding tightens, the legacy cross-border plumbing is always the first thing to break. But if an alternative, fully compliant, mathematically neutral pipeline is already laid and tested, the water will inevitably find the path of least resistance.
That is a phenomenal and frankly quite sobering thought to end on. If you want to understand where the world is going, understanding the deep plumbing of the financial system really is the ultimate shortcut. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the infrastructure of trust. Until next time, keep looking past the noise.